This time on the Platinum Patrol, we have a replay from the RathFr Nick, StarCraft 2. It says GL, GL, GL to his opponent. Now, it was requested specifically for this video to balance whine about Protoss. But there's two Terrans in the game. So I'm not really sure why. Oh, because they're going to tell each other how their race is weak and the Protoss are strong. I see. Yeah, Nick says Terran UP. And Prodigy says true. Based on his name, we must know he's an excellent player. So he says dab. Okay, that's interesting and all, but let's see what's going on in the game. Now, it's going to be hard to balance one about Protoss in a TVT, since there's not a Protoss in the game. But we'll try. You see this SCV? This SCV wouldn't have had to stay here if this was a Protoss worker. The probe would have just gone back and gone mining. Seems a little unfair that Terran has to always have the worker building a structure, and they can't just click on it and the structure warp in by itself. Now, from another thing we could point out here, if this was a Protoss, from what I've heard according to the Terran players, he'd already have like 20 probes. Terran only has 19 because he has Chrono Boost, and after he finishes his first pylon, he can Chrono Boost out the probes. He should have more money. He would have more money. Can we look at the income tab? He would have 5% more money at this point, approximately. Also, why is the RathFr Nick 100 down in mining? What's going on here? Oh, he has double gas, that's why. He's getting more gas. Anyway, but you see this right here? If this was a Protoss building, it'd be warping in here earlier. Although, it wouldn't be able to fly if it got attacked, but that's not really important here. So we look around the map, look, see this? This orbital command? He had to upgrade his base in order to call in this mule. The Protoss doesn't have to upgrade the base. That costs at least one SCV. And then you have mules afterwards, but those take energy, so they're not consistent. Because you have to wait for the energy to come back, so they're not always up. Theoretically. There's a little Reaper fight here. We'll take a look at this before we go back to Protoss. See, if this wasn't an Adept, it would have two-shotted this. If it was a Stalker, it would have killed it faster too. So the fact that this was a Terran unit makes it worse. And then the Protoss shields regenerate too, so it's basically a Reaper. It's basically just as good, but it's Protoss. Now, if we go over here and look at what we've got going on for the other Terran player, he's also got a factory and a couple barracks. Nothing too crazy here. Getting more workers. RathFr Nick's down 3 SCVs already, which is not good. But the reason why, if we take a look here, they each lost one. Actually, he just doesn't have the second base yet. This base didn't build any SCVs either, though. So I guess he's just had worse SCV production off his main. The Protoss wouldn't have to worry about this though, because this would already be done, right? This Nexus would already be done if it was a Nexus. The probe would have gone back to mining somewhere else, and when it went back, he would have seen he wasn't building anything, and he could have built more. So not having his probe come back lost him out on mining. He also has a mule he could call in, but he might be saving that for a scan. You never know. Fusion core. So if this was a Protoss here, this would be I guess the equivalent of a fleet beacon. I actually can't say much there because a fleet beacon takes forever to build and it costs a ton of money. A lot of Marines building up. Look at this wall, a Protoss wall. You just click the pylons and warp them. Although you don't really make it out of pylons, you usually make it out of gateways. We have a starport, and I guess this guy doesn't want this reactor. Yeah, what was that? Anyway, so back over here. You see this base? It's only got 2 workers. This was Protoss base. This would be mined out. Well, not mined out. He'd be like maybe 8 to 10 probes there, and he'd already be getting his 3rd base because Protoss can take their 3rd base so easily because the Terrans never. Actually, sorry, not never. They don't have the ability to attack, is what I've heard from Terran players. Any attack is stopped by 1 shield battery and a Stalker. See, before I made this video, I made sure to read up on the forums and listen to people I knew who were Terrans about what was wrong with Protoss. So I got a very complete and accurate picture of what's wrong with the race by reading the people's posts on the internet. And also talking to people who requested balanced whine about Protoss for their opinions on Protoss. So you know, they're very responsible and accurate as well. Now, in this TVT, I'm trying to think how else we can make this about Protoss. See this? This will be a Phoenix. Honestly, Vikings are just awful. I mean, compare a Viking to a Corruptor, right? The Corruptor costs 150, 100, I think. Viking costs 125, 75, so you're paying 25 more for literally double the health. Double the health. Among other things. Alright, there's a big landing here, actually. These Marines coming here. That Viking doing a scouting... some scouting. Now, these Marines actually might take out this Fusion Core. What's he using it for? We don't know. Looks like it's a BC. BC will finish. And these Marines can't fight again. Let's pick this up. Alright, that could have been a little better targeted, but the BC is now warping across into the main, I'm guessing. Okay, honestly, the only thing that Protoss can do to warp across the map offensively is a mothership. But, yeah, so I don't know if we have a comparison here, but if this is a warp prism, it could have warped in the units here. That's very similar. Yeah, again, Marines don't fare so well against battle cruisers. Something about the base armor being ridiculous. In a good way. Oh, finish off these medevacs! Right click that one. Okay, this guy smartly retreated it. I guess he right clicked on the tech lab? That might be annoying. 2 SDVs back here finish the work. Again, they're Protoss, they would have already gone back to work. Be mining this gas geyser. This BC does die. The BC didn't have tactical jump again, but if it was a Protoss player, he would have had recall. He could have recalled that. It would have been much better. Now, we have some Marines over here. Imagine if these were Zealots. I guess there would be half as many. So you have 4 Zealots. That's actually not that scary. But they could come in here and start hitting this wall. This wall would stop a Zealot run by. I'm not sure this guy's really overloading on minerals at this point. He's got a 1400 bank. Honestly, we're going back to talking about Protoss because it's a little less painful looking at this bank. So down here, if we look at the RathFr Nick base, see these tanks? I guess the best comparison for a tank? I don't know what the best comparison for a tank is. That's a good question. What is the best comparison for a siege tank? Maybe Colossus and Disruptors don't seem quite right, but they are siege units. We're just pretend they're part of the base. We're gonna pretend these are photon cannons, because I heard from these Terran players that you can't leave your base without tanks in it, so let's pretend it's a cannon and a shield battery with a sentry, something like that combination. It's a cannon that shoots ground and costs gas. Let's do this. A lot of tanks being built here for the RathFr Nick. He's up to 6, I think? But still, his opponent has a 3rd base. His isn't done yet. If he was Protoss, both of these bases will be done right now. They'd be on 4ths or something. Now, if we take a look at these mineral counts, he's doing alright. Main's starting to mine out. I'm guessing a 4th will be taken here. The RathFr Nick looks like he's guarding this area. Now, if he was Protoss, he could just warp in a pylon and walk away. Or you could put a Dark Templar in here. Let's talk about that. We didn't talk about Dark Templars yet. If we look, there's no detection outside these scans. If RathFr Nick was a Protoss, and at this point walked a DT into each base, I think he'd just win the game. No, I think he'd just win. There's only one scan here. This is 20 seconds out. This one's even longer out. At least from when I said it. If we walked a DT in each base, so many workers would die. And imagine you're a Terran, you don't have a Raven or missile turrets, and then you drop a mule and you see a DT, and then you lose. It's like the worst feeling ever. At least that's what I've been told. And I can imagine it too. It's like if you're a Protoss, you don't have an observer or a cannon and they have a DT there, you just lose. So that's something the Terrans can't do. They don't have an instant win cloaked unit. I mean, the Banshee's a cloaked unit, but you know what I'm saying. It's not an instant win cloaked unit because you'd have to... Yeah, it's just not. Anyway, here we have these Vikings fly right over the tank line. This tank line obliterates Prodigy's army here. We have to go back and look at this. Look, he put his Vikings in front of his army, I guess the scout, flew them right over all of RathFr Nick's tanks, so he knew they were there. Next, he had the medevacs come in front of his Marines, so they're completely separated and couldn't heal them. And they were in front, so they're more vulnerable. And then behind them, he had his Marines, with forewarning that there were the whole line of tanks, like 6 tanks here, and he still attacked. If these were Protoss units, I guess they'd be Templars, and they'd be in the back because they're slower, so they're not vulnerable in front of his army. And if they were not Marines, they wouldn't have died instantly. So, again, we can clearly see that the Protoss has a much better situation here than the Terran, because all the Terran stuff just kind of dies. I don't think RathFr Nick lost a unit. He walked right into that. Now, if these are Protoss units, they wouldn't have died immediately. Okay, I think these guys are a little late to the party. You might want to leave. Are we coming back? Is this the prison line? I mean, they are prisoners, probably. Ooh, that unsiege, saving a tank and a marine. Alright, those are the marines that misbehaved, and then the commander sent them in to die because they didn't do their job right. Now, RathFr Nick just gained a massive supply by doing that. Basically sitting sieged up. Now, if this was a Protoss army, like I said, they wouldn't have died, and those would have been zealots, and the zealots can run right onto the army and chop it all up. So, I guess being Protoss would have been better there. RathFr Nick here's got his tanks, got his Vikings. He's gonna go siege up. He scans. There are a decent number of Marines, but there's only one tank. He's gonna siege up in range of this tank. I think the Marines will stim forward and get it though. Yeah, there goes pretty much everything. RathFr Nick sieging up. If this is a Protoss army, you could just warp in zealots on top of this or something. And you'd already have this base too, we can't forget that. Plus he might even have carriers. Storm wouldn't be amazing here, but if he had carriers or Void Rays, just think about that. 2 Void Rays, I think, might be 3 Void Rays to beat these Vikings, but they're low health. Prodigy says GG, and looks like RathFr Nick wins the game because his opponent was not a Protoss, but also the underpowered Terran race.